young lady.
What's with him?
This time we watch Season 11, Episode 12, Carnival Magic.
Where it's always time of the chimps.
Sure. Chimps ahoy. And yes, I wanted to emphasize that. It's 11:12, not 11:09. I said 11:09 for whatever reason in last episode when we were announcing this one, but that is Yongri, Monster from the Deep.
Oh no. Oh, we've managed to go 70 episodes and not get that wrong. I panic every time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well.
This is the one time I did not have a second thought. This is the one time I was sure. I saw it in the document. And I'm looking at it right now for Agents Revenge, where we have all our notes. And it says, next time, 11:09, Carnival Magic. And it's like, I will not double check that. It's totally fine.
I didn't even think about that when I was editing it. Oh, well, we've got other letters and corrections to make, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. I guess first we've got a letter from Tim of the podcast The Fiasco Brothers Watch a Movie, aka ILT for Fiasco, which I have spelt as Diasco here.
Oh no.
Because it's errors aplenty. And he writes, hey, I was actually a fan of a spelling series. In 1996, he and Fox teamed up for Kindred the Embraced, a one-season wonder based on Vampire the Masquerade series of role-playing games.
Oh.
Huh. I thought at the time that was the best possible adaptation of the World of Darkness we were going to get from spelling and a network, but still wasn't all that objectively good. I've always been curious about that show because it was a soap opera that starred two great That Guy baddies, Brian Thompson and Jeff Kober, who are just two great big, deep voice guys who have a tendency to show up as meanies in a lot of 90s television.
Curious little addition. What else have we heard from people?
Well, we've also got a fun little factoid about Angel's Revenge, courtesy of Pat, who wrote in via our website. And it turns out that the part of Pat Buttram, he writes, appears to be based on a real person. West Coasters of a certain age will remember the used car salesman Cal Worthington. He dressed like a country western singer and owned a string of dealerships that ran endless ads on UHF channels. The ads featured exotic animals, penguins, bears, tigers, goats, zebras, etc., and they were all called his dog Spot. And he often finished the ads with the tagline, if you can find a better deal on a car, I'll eat a bug.
We'll have some links for some of those ads in the show notes. They're pretty delightful.
Yeah, it reminds me of his successor. I can't remember the exact guy's name, but his ads were for the Family Auto Mart. So it's like, welcome everybody to the Family Auto Mart. As he jumps around, he's a real Louis Anderson kind of figure.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and he inspired the role of Bud Gleeful, played by the delightful Stephen Root, on a great little cartoon series called Gravity Falls.
Nice. We have one other clarification to make. In the Shallow 13, for our recent episode on Angel's Revenge, we talked a bit about a porn star who we refer to as Johnny Wad. And just to clarify, Johnny Wad is what he's sometimes known as, but that was apparently the character he played. His real name, John Holmes. So those of you who care deeply about getting the accuracy of your 80s porn stars correct, we hear you and we recognize you. And our bad. We will try to do better in the future on porn stars. Next, we've got a little bit of news. So as everybody knows, there's no season 13 coming anytime soon because Netflix canceled our show. But MST3K decided to do a special feature, a live streaming event over on YouTube and other streaming services, where the crew from the touring show basically had a Zoom call and did extra riffs over an old episode, Moon 02, back from season 1. Did you get a chance to check out that stream?
I didn't. I had the intention of kind of watching it because I know there was going to be like an after party type thing with Joel answering questions and possibly interacting with his riffers. But because I was curious to check out the cheesy movie circus tour, who I understand were the riffers.
Yes.
And so I was checking that out, and I did like the look of GPC, aka Gypsy, the new looking puppet I quite enjoyed that puppet. And so I was looking forward to that, but I simply didn't have time, which doesn't make any sense given the current time of year that it is.
Well, you can still watch that stream. It's still, as of recording, it's still on their YouTube channel, and I don't expect it to go away anytime soon. I only watched a little bit of it because I fell asleep, but it has nothing to do with the quality of the stream. It was more to do with my bizarre sleep schedule these days. Anyways, the one thing I will say is that it was very weird seeing their faces like that. I really appreciated the technology of the silhouette, because when people are watching a movie and waiting for a chance to say a joke, they don't have they have that resting watching TV face, which is weird. And I don't want to keep looking at it. So I think Emily probably did a great job. It's not her fault that her face was on screen and she was watching TV, etc. But yeah, that's weird. Let's do silhouettes again from now on, shall we?
No, that raises the question. Are their faces illuminated and they're facing out for the live shows?
When I saw them, they were on a sort of podium off to the side of the stage with the screen happening in the middle. So you could turn your head and look at them when they were telling a joke, but you weren't sort of staring at them constantly because you were watching the movie on another part of the stage. So that worked way better, I thought. You got the sort of the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And from one thing that I saw from the Riff Tracks MST3K reunion is that they kind of mixed it up where you would mostly watch the shorts that they were featuring, and occasionally you would see like the actors there, or the riffers, in like little squares a la the Brady Bunch, and every now and then it would be a close-up of them. So it was constantly varying between, again, that box treatment, just the short, or just the riffers.
Well, we need to get talking about this episode that we're doing a little bit of Carnival Magic. So shall we go into the big top and see what terrors are happening there?
Let's rush to talk about the movie where nothing happens, yet everything happens.
This time we watch Season 11, Episode 12, Carnival Magic. This movie takes place in America. A little after Angel's Revenge, a little before Master Ninja. A strange time, just after the death of disco, when all that Americans could do for a good time was go to their local carnival, see a few freaks, lose a few rigged ring toss games, and wait for the release of ColecoVision. It's a time barely out of stagflation and malaise, and things aren't going so well for Stoney and his carnival. Their main attraction, Kirk the Tiger Tamer, is just not pulling crowds anymore. Kirk is convinced that a new guy to the carnival, Markov, is talking to his tigers and messing with their heads, which sounds crazy, but here's the twist. It's basically true. Markov, it turns out, is sort of magic, although this film seems to think that you become magic by being a white guy who's raised by Buddhists in Nepal. One of Markov's weird habits is not letting people into his trailer, but eventually Stoney's daughter Ellen finds out about the secret he's keeping inside. He lives with a chimp named Alex, and Alex, the chimp, can talk. Well, he can sort of talk. He can mumble.
What's his name?
Monster.
Oh my God, he can talk.
Well, kind of.
But this is more than most chimps can do, and once Stoney gets Markov to agree to put Alex into the show, the complete and utter novelty of an extremely low-energy circus show with a barely talkative chimp turns out to be far more popular than increasingly deadly and bloody tigers. Tiger Tamer Kirk is losing his reputation, and also his blood. So, after one vicious attack, he decides he's going to have his revenge on Markov, and he kidnaps Alex. Kirk gives Alex to a shoddy-looking research institute where a scientist with a bad German accent talks about the importance of vivisection, a gruesome procedure that they never get around to doing to Alex. Instead, after Kirk slaps his girlfriend a few times, she runs off and tells the Carney crew, who rush to the institute and liberate Alex. The end. Oh wait. Also, Alex had a few scenes in the middle where he kidnapped a young woman in a car and got into a dangerous chase with the local cops. And also there was that time he stole a woman's bra while she was sleeping. So yeah, justice is coming for Alex.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, Tom delivers a TED Talk in the prelude, and Jonah gets sucked off. There's a tube, and anyway, you saw the thing. After Jonah's sucked through a tube and forced to reenact his origin story for the opening credits, Tom continues his TED Talk while Kinga reveals her intentions to marry Jonah for a ratings ploy. For the invention exchange, Jonah and the bots present Eastapets. It's mostly an excuse to make bread-themed puns. The Mads unveil a special drink, for their part of the invention exchange, which causes your sweat to become flavored. Afterwards, Tom does his best carnival barker, with Crow as his unimpressive talking chimp. It's all part of his circus show with Jonah, dressed as Markov, and Gypsy, seen here sporting a wig and a terrifying showgirl real doll body. The sketch accurately summarizes the movie's many failings, but yeesh, that real doll body. In the next sketch, Tom and Crow hop on CB radios and pretend to be the incompetent local police force from today's movie. Later, a space circus tent floats up. It's the Great Space Circus Show, run by none other than P.T. Mindslap. Hey kids, it's Mark Hamill. Applause! Mindslap, Jonah, and the bots sing a little ditty about the Great Space Circus Show, but Kinga and Max deduce that this is all a ruse to buy the bots, and possibly Jonah, for Mindslap's fraudulent, non-existent circus con. Oldest trick in the book. Lastly, Kinga and Max narrate a parade of floats of either cardboard or what's supposed to be Jonah's wood carvings. Remember those? Not sure on that one. The end.
That is an excellent chimp impression.
Thank you.
We're back in the Netflix era. Feels like a little while since we've watched one of these. It felt weird coming back to them.
Well, does it feel any stranger than watching the movie, or does the movie feel like it's just a particularly... It's the season 7 episode they spent all their money on?
You know, I pitched this question to the good people in our Slack, people who support us on patreon.com/itsjustashow, and they had similar feelings. And I think it's a general sense that this is a particularly weird movie, even by MST3K standards, which I'm not sure is totally true. Like, it's a weird movie, but I don't think it's any more weird than any number of films that they've done.
In fact, I think this takes its rightful place alongside Monster A Go-Go and the Coleman Francis trilogy as weird and pointless.
I don't want to say I liked the film, but it seems like so many people really didn't like this film and therefore didn't like the episode.
For shame.
I find this film perfectly fine. I don't know.
Well, I think that before the episode came out, it was writer Matt Oswalt who talked about how, I believe it was this movie that did him in on Twitter. He talked about how this was the hardest one to sit down and write riffs for. It just completely broke him, and he implied the rest of the writing staff.
Huh. Yeah, that's weird, but all right.
Yeah, because, I think there were potentially more boring and more unpleasant movies to watch in season 11. But then again, I love the pointless time-stopping movies, so I have a real soft spot for Carnival Magic.
Sure.
And I actually think this is one of the highlights of the new series, sitting proudly with Cry Wilderness. I kind of love this episode. And it was made all the more fun and bizarre when this, as it turns out, was not an unknown movie experience for me. It was an unknown movie experience for me like a decade before this episode was released, because did you know this was a lost movie?
I didn't know about it when the show first aired, but I have since found out about it because I am a diligent podcaster and look these things up.
There you go. Yeah, this had completely vanished and only got dug up, I think, in like 2009. So it went missing for quite a few decades.
Yeah, but it looks like it made a bit of a splash when it was rediscovered amongst people who are into these kinds of movies.
Yeah. The guy who found it became obsessed with it. And in fact, there were people who had been hunting for it for some time, because when director Al Adamson died, there was a belief that, he has the reels in his house. And it turns out he didn't. But somebody found it in a warehouse and thought it was the craziest, weirdest, most baffling movie. And of course, word of mouth spreads, and eventually that led to a DVD and Blu-ray release, which tracked down the sole surviving person who would talk to anybody, the producer. And it's a surprisingly deluxe offering for a movie like Carnival Magic. Again, pre-MST3K episode, and that's how I initially saw this movie.
Wow. Well, we'll have to talk more about the director and things like that in a little bit. This I also thought was, with the possible exception of, I guess, Elliot Kalin, probably the best celebrity appearance on season 11's many terrible celebrity appearances.
Yes. It's one of those things where it's like, how is the PT Mindslap sketch? It's not great, but it is. It has a certain kind of fun to it, because Mark Hamill fits in with the MST3K vibe and aesthetic way better than, say, Will Wheaton or Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes.
And the fact that he's doing it's both great and a little sad is that if you're familiar with Mark Hamill, then you know that he's kind of trying to do his Joker voice, but he can't do the Joker voice anymore because he's gotten too old. So he can't hit those high notes anymore.
Well.
So it's like when you try to listen to, say, Frank Welker try to do his old Transformers characters. And again, it's like, he did those 30 years ago. He can't hit those high notes anymore. And it's the same with Hamill here. But Hamill, at the very least, has the kind of energy where, had things worked out a little differently and Joel had not made up his mind about who should host the new MST3K and Mark Hamill was interested, they should have totally done that.
That would have been interesting, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I do like the general concept of a ringmaster whose big shtick is that it's all dark and he's just describing it to you. I think that was a funny start for the sketch, but it went on for a bit and yada, yada, yada.
I kind of wish that was the sketch instead of a song about that happening and then that being underlined.
Yeah. This movie is very 70s or very 1980-81 at the very least, because it came out in 81 originally, right?
It was completed in 81, and I think it was gradually released between 82 and 83. You know, I think they had only like 1 or 2 prints, and they traveled.
I'm glad that we're continuing with our 70s theme, or this post-70s theme, because this definitely feels like the crash from Angel's Revenge's Coke-Fueled High.
Yes, this is the malaise. This is it. Yeah, like we're experiencing a decade hangover here, because even if this hit in 1983, like this is pure 70s. This is pure 70s. It's dour.
Yep.
Nobody can decide what the tone is. There's a plot about age of consent.
Yeah.
Involving a tomboy girl, which again was very, very prominent in 70s type movies. And of course, there's several references to people's spouses dying horribly in a kids' movie.
In my other podcast, the literary one, we just did an episode on Great Expectations, in which parents just die all the time. So this seems normal to me right now. But yes, it is more of a 70s thing than it would be an 80s or 90s thing, I suppose.
You heard it here first. Great Expectations, the Carnival Magic of Literature. That's a book I quite enjoy, actually. I should listen to that episode. I don't know. There's something about it, as I said, where like the entire movie is kind of a car crash because of this horrible unpleasantness. It's a bit like eating a well-cooked meal on broken glass. And that it's like, well, all of this kind of like makes sense. It's like, it's a wacky ape movie and the ape steals a car and there's like a girl in the car and the cops chase after the ape and all this sort of stuff. And the ape gets into a couple of shenanigans and
realizes that it's a chimp and not an ape.
Yes. Well, you know, apes is apes. That's what I've learned.
We have a history on this podcast of not really caring about the distinctions between various primates, possibly including humans. And I think we should continue in that vein.
Yes. This could be our 6 bay. But all the stuff about it is very, very 70s, even to the point of the voice of Alex isn't even fun.
No.
Like, he just sounds like the town drunk. He sounds like the dispatcher from Jiffy Cabs of my youth.
Yeah, it's a miserable excuse of a chimp. And you know what? One of the things about this episode that struck me was that Jonah and the bots are constantly saying, wait, where's the talking chimp? This is a movie about a talking chimp. But it's not. Like, the Carnival Magic isn't the talking chimp. It's Markov. This is Markov's story. The chimp is just this one of several side stories. But because it's so interesting, it feels like it should be the main story. Or at least theoretically, it should be interesting. Like, you've got a talking chimp. That should be the center of your movie. But the talking chimp isn't very good. And that's not the movie you wanted to write. You wanted to write a movie about terrible people being terrible to each other in the carny life.
Well, that's sort of the fascinating thing is that, again, any other person, script-wise or directing-wise, would have really focused on the talking chimp and made that the primary focus of the movie. But instead, Alex is but one player in a large ensemble of this Robert Altman-esque film. And that's where it's so confusing, because if you were to describe it, this would sound like a totally candy-coated movie of the 80s. But when you sit down and watch it, it's as sour and unpleasant as every PG movie of the 70s.
Well, let's talk about our Robert Altman. Al Adamson, the director of this film, who I don't know anything about, but he seems to be quite storied.
Oh, yes. And perhaps it wouldn't surprise you that our friend Al Adamson was, in fact, no novice when it comes to entertaining children. For a few of his titles are as follows: The Naughty Stewardesses.
Oh, yeah.
Lash of Lust.
Uh-huh.
Black Samurai.
Yep.
Five Bloody Graves.
Oh, I think we watched that one in elementary school on a rainy day.
Yeah. And Jesse's Girls. And I've always wanted to be that movie. Yeah, Al Adamson is a schlockmeister, or was a schlockmeister. He passed away in 1995. But he's like worked with a ton of people like that you'll recognize from this very program, including Bud Cardos, who directed Outlaw of Gore.
Yes.
And Graydon Clark, who directed Angel's Revenge.
Oh, good. They're all together.
Mm-hmm. Everybody's favorite, John Carradine. And of course, I've got to stand up for Regina Carroll, who is Adamson's wife, who appears in this film as the love interest for Markov.
Oh, right. Yes.
Because I genuinely think, like, maybe I've gone crazy, Chris, and maybe just the sight of a woman is enough in quarantine times, but I genuinely think she was really good.
She was fine, yeah.
She was really sincere in a movie that, like, desperately needed some earnestness. But yeah, Al Adamson's kind of like an interesting guy. Oh, he also, unsurprisingly, I think he worked with Ted V. Michaels. He certainly worked with the actress who is the star of The Girl in Gold Boots, because she was in his all-female Wild Bunch, The Female Bunch.
No.
Which we talked about on our Girl in Gold Boots episode, because it was shot at the Spawn Ranch.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's got such good bona fides. Why did it take so long for MST3K to do one of his movies?
I think because there's a fair amount of gore in some of these movies.
Fair enough.
So, you have to dodge your way around that. But also, Al Adamson, let's face it, is a bit more of an auteur than most, as you can gather from his one for-hire movie, Carnival Magic.
A for-hire movie?
Yeah, he didn't script this at all.
Oh, right.
And he's usually pretty heavily involved in the creative process, hence making movies like Brain of Blood and Angel's Wild Women, which is surprisingly not Angel's Revenge.
Right. Right. So somebody else wrote this and then hired this guy to make this children's movie, ?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Why? Why would they choose him, other than they could afford him?
I think it's the Roger Corman effect, whereas it's more than being affordable, although that's half the deal. It's like, are you the cheapest and quickest? And so being able to, it's like, oh man, I can shoot a movie in this time frame for this schedule, and you know what? I can probably wrap it early. Hearing that is what every producer wants to hear, regardless of how fancy they are.
I'm just going to be convinced that this is due to some terrible loss at a poker match somewhere.
Yeah. Well, Al Adamson, I'm sure, needed to make a boat payment. But what's kind of neat about him is there's two things. One is really sweet and one's really horrifying. So let's talk about that. The two sides of Al Adamson. So he got into the business in the family way. And it had nothing to do with his wife Regina Carroll. I mean that his father was a silent screen cowboy. His name was Denver Dixon, aka Victor Adamson.
Okay.
And so Dixon and another actress, Dolores Booth, they had Al Adamson. And then essentially Adamson got interested in making movies, and the very first movie he made was called Halfway to Hell, and was kind of a gritty Western starring none other than his dad.
Huh.
Which is pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's your dad. He's there. He's an actor. You're going to take advantage of that. But yes, it is nice.
And from what I understand, it's better than Ega, another father and son production.
Absolutely.
So Adamson continues making schlock, and he does a really weird thing, which is that it's one thing to retitle your movie for the drive-in market, and Adamson lived for the drive-in market. He became fairly wealthy because of it. But he would re-edit the movies completely to the point where, depending on what version of a film you're watching, like if you're watching it under its third or fourth title, the film might be incomprehensible.
Well, and as we've learned, even under the best of circumstances with Carnival Magic, it may not be that comprehensible to begin with.
Yeah, although at the very least, at no point in Carnival Magic do we cut to unrelated news footage of anything. And then lastly, Carnival Magic was the second last film he worked on. He was still dabbling in films, but he was more or less retired. He sort of saw the end of the drive-in as the end of his relevance, which is surprisingly prescient of him. And so he was retired for most of the 80s. He decided to get back into the business towards the tail end of the 90s. And at this point, he's traded careers. He's now working in real estate development. But this leads us to the tragic death of Al Adamson, because he got in an argument with a contractor who was remodeling his home in California, and then no one heard from him for a while. And it turns out that he was entombed in concrete where his jacuzzi was supposed to be.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I was about to say that it's like something out of an Al Adamson movie. Except a scene like that sounds pretty cool. Which no Adamson movie would ever contain.
Oh, boy. Wow. Well, that's not the ending I was hoping for.
No. But here's the crazy thing. Al Adamson, who I've read a ton of things. I kid because I love. I have a soft spot for all schlock makers, and every interview I read with Al Adamson suggests that he was a really on the level and sweet guy, and totally devoted to his wife Regina Carroll, who sadly passed away in the 90s, just a few years before him. But essentially, this got a lot of people talking because a rumor was going around that Carnival Magic was somewhere in his home. And so there was already a reputation for Carnival Magic and a hunger to track down Carnival Magic.
Right. Is that how they found his body?
Oh my God. No, I don't know for sure, but I'd like to think that's what happened. It's like, well, I've got bad news and bad news.
They must have put it in the jacuzzi spot. Eesh. Wow. Wow, that's a bit of a Debbie Downer.
Yeah. Luckily, we could cheer ourselves up with a shallow 13.
Okay, tonal shift starting 2, 3, 1.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 magically mumbled facts about this movie and this episode, Carnival Magic. Go, Adam, go!
Contrary to your common sense, Carnival Magic really was released in cinemas and played in 25 theaters across the United States over the course of 1 year before the print disappeared for decades.
Mark Weston, who appears in the film as Stoney, the carnival owner, co-wrote the film with the producer's lawyer, Bob Levine.
Producer Elvin Feltner has one other production credit on IMDb: Teenage Strangler, riffed in Season 5.
And among the fictional Elvin Feltner disaster movies invented by the bots is Tornado.
Unfortunately, Trailer Park Productions' other movies weren't nearly as successful.
They tried a couple of disaster movies, Tornado, and The Night the Septic Tank Gave Out.
Unsurprisingly, there really is a movie called Tornado, starring B-movie king Bruce Campbell. Feltner was not involved in its production.
Outside of his MST3K connection, Feltner's name is infamous, at least to the Screen Actors Guild. When the Guild insisted he fly the main actors first class from New York to the sets in Charlotte, North Carolina, Feltner opted to bus them in via Greyhound. The Guild was less than thrilled.
Now, if several of the leads were already established in New York, why take the Greyhound to Charlotte for a talking chimp movie? Well, most of the leads were soap opera actors, and according to Feltner, they were looking to leave their less reputable daytime TV gigs to appear in a legitimate movie, even if it was a talking chimp movie filmed in Charlotte.
The late Don Stewart, aka Markov, was a child actor who first appeared in 1942's Where Trails End. Stewart continued to act when he outgrew the cute little kid in Western shtick, appearing in series like Dragnet 67, Jag, Beverly Hills 90210, LA Law, etc. He was also the star of daytime soap Guiding Light when he was cast in Carnival Magic. His weirdest credit isn't even Carnival Magic. Carnival Magic isn't even his weirdest kids movie credit, as Stewart lent his voice to the bizarre animated feature Rover Dangerfield, a film which dared to ask the question, what if Rodney Dangerfield was a dog?
Jonah and the bots make a lot of jokes about the opening scene credit for The Girl in the Car.
Guys, let's not jump to any conclusions. Sure, she's a girl in a car, but is she the girl in the car?
But what young starlet landed this plum role? Turns out it's Missy O'Shea, aka Missy Crutchfield. After appearing in films in roles like model, girl in car, girl in model, etc., Missy became an arts administrator for Chattanooga State and University of Tennessee Chattanooga in the 90s, and later worked as head of the Arts Commission under former Chattanooga Mayor Ron Littlefield. So that's a career.
Of course, the real star of the movie is Alex the Chimp, played by Trudy the Chimp. Yes, Alex was played by a girl, and was apparently one of the best trained chimps available, by which we mean Trudy only bit most of the cast.
Late in the movie, during an intense close-up of a wide-eyed Markov, Tom asks,
Is this a sequel to Scanners?
Scanners, a David Cronenberg horror film about powerful psychics, gained infamy for its gruesome head explosion scene and is a treasured part of our Canadian heritage. As such, both it and its sequels, including the spin-off film Scanner Cop, have recently been discussed on Megaphonic's CanCon Horror podcast, a part of our Scaritage. In fact, Scaritage just released an episode on Scanners 3 this week, and will be focusing on, what else, Scanner Cop 2 in June.
We're treated with another show-stopping special appearance by a recognizable face. Now, whether that's show-stopping in the sense that it captures the attention of viewers, or grinds the show to a halt is a matter of opinion. Nonetheless, Mark Hamill, best known for his role as a priest in John Carpenter's Village of the Damned, appears as singing circus owner P.T. Mindslap. So why is Mark Hamill in this? Simple. He donated to the Kickstarter.
Speaking of special appearances, what's the deal with the guy in the purple jumpsuit in the final host segment? The host that we get to see for just a few microseconds is Matt Claude Van Damme, played by MST3K revival writer Matt McGinnis. Matt Claude Van Damme, a name incidentally coined by series creator Joel Hodgson, did not reappear in season 12, but McGinnis returned as a writer for that season, and even served as art director and puppet maker for the Great Cheesy Movie Circus Tour.
The text block at the end serves as a sequel hook. So long for now, see you next year in more Carnival Magic. And it appears after the credits in the original cut of the film, instead of between the final scene and the credits in the episode. Now, regardless of which version of Carnival Magic you watch, there will be no more Carnival Magic.
And there will be no more Shallow 13, for that's time! So, Adam, you mentioned that this film was considered lost for many years.
Yeah. Which made it all the more exciting to uncover.
Exactly. And it's interesting that a movie so recent has become lost, because you usually think of it as happening to movies, back in the early days of cinema before anyone was thinking of preservation and so forth.
Yeah. And, it's funny is that when I think about lost media, I honestly think of two things. It's either going to be a movie from the silent era or early talkie era, and the nitrate's completely destroyed and all of that, or it's BBC television that they've wiped.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Early Doctor Who, which is not a show that I watch, but the fact that so much early Doctor Who only exists in terms of like recordings that people made by holding microphones up to the TV sets and such.
And what's impressive is that the fans of Doctor Who, not only have they relocated most of the Doctor Who episodes that went missing, and they're able to clean them up, either digitally fixing those recordings, or they found an episode of Doctor Who, or a serial of Doctor Who, or even a whole season of Doctor Who that was, say, dubbed in one case in Arabic. And it's like, oh, well, we have the English soundtrack from those recordings. So let's mix the footage with that soundtrack and clean it up.
That's fantastic. Good work, fans.
Yeah, lots of neat stuff happened. A lot of the Patrick Troughton era of Doctor Who has mercifully come back, since Troughton is arguably the best actor to play the role. And interestingly enough, in a weird case of lost media, a late period Doctor Who story that was long thought missing has recently been completed that I watched, called Shada.
When is that from?
That's from Tom Baker's penultimate season.
Oh, I didn't think any of those would have been lost.
Exactly. Well, this was lost due to a technician strike.
Oh.
So they shot half the story. And it was supposed to be script editor Douglas Adams' swan song for his run on the show.
Huh.
And funnily enough, because it didn't get made, he recycled large portions of the plot into the very first Dirk Gently novel. So it's got a weird crossover. But man, they finally finished a version on DVD, and I'm not going to be churlish because personally I didn't find it all that entertaining, but they completed it using animation and even, as a kind of a nice little surprise, some extra live action footage that was shot and blended in with the 70s footage that was shot. They did the best they could, and again, the effort deserves to be applauded. But what was hilarious is that the original VHS release of What Little They Had consisted of all the footage they shot and new footage of actor Tom Baker several years later wandering around the Doctor Who museum, and you discover only too late that all they shot was the exposition for the serial. And so the story would finally start to gear up, and then you'd cut to Tom Baker standing next to a bunch of Doctor Who costumes, and he'd say, and then something terribly exciting happened, but we didn't film it. Probably the worst experience that you could have. I was actually in a house where some friends of mine had rented Shada, thinking it would be really cool. It's like, wow, the lost Douglas Adams Doctor Who, this will be so cool. And like, nope, I've been down that road before. See you guys. And I was hanging out with some lady in my room, and upstairs, all I could hear was like people were like laughing and clapping at all like the funny dialogue in the exposition scene. And then you would cut to Tom Baker go, and then again, something terribly exciting happened that we didn't film. And you would just hear a widespread, oh!
There was another recent film. I was looking up, what are some lost films, trying to see if there were any interesting recent ones. And there's another one here, which looked very intriguing. But then I went over to Amazon, and you can buy it on DVD. So I'm not sure. Maybe you know the story, but the film is Catch My Soul.
Catch My Soul?
It's the only feature film directed by Patrick McGoohan of The Prisoner.
Oh my God. Hold on. I thought I found a copy of that.
Well, you can get it on Amazon. So yes, that does exist. But it's on this list. This list is from 2010. And the DVD looks like it came out in 2016. So maybe it appeared. It looks like McGoohan tried to suppress the film after, according to this article, which again, I don't know how trustworthy this is. According to McGoohan, one of the producers found God and recut the movie, adding 15 minutes of religious material. And McGoohan tried to remove his name from the credits and then suppress the film entirely, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I read that interview, so I believe that's what happened. Oh my God, I forgot all about Catch My Soul.
Oh yeah, it looks like they had recently rediscovered the negative when the DVD came out. Weird.
Yeah. I tell you though, there is one movie that I am just aching for somebody to find, and that is London After Midnight, which is a movie I only know because of one picture, which I'm going to put in the Slack right now. It's a Lon Chaney Sr. film.
Oh, that is a fantastic promo shot. I assume it's a promo shot, but maybe it isn't.
Yeah, that's a promo shot of the creature who would have been featured in the film, which is, again, another terrific Lon Chaney Sr. makeup job where he's very heavily eyeshadowed, and he's got this amazing set of pointed, sharp teeth, and he's just doing a great Dr. Tongue's 3D House of Stewardesses hand gesture, and he's kind of got his tongue to the side, and he's dressed very dapper, complete with top hat, and he looks like the most terrifying thing that you would encounter late at night.
On the list of lost films on Wikipedia, the final one, the most recent lost film that they list, is a movie called Him. Him. It's a pornographic film. Can you guess who it's a pornographic film about?
Is it a pornographic parody of the movie Her, about like the guy who falls in love with an AI in his phone?
No, this film is from 1974.
Oh.
And so the him in question is somebody you've probably heard of, somebody named Jesus Christ.
Oh, it's HYMN.
No, it's just capital HIM.
Oh.
There's a little picture of an ad for it. World premiere now. Are you curious about his sexual life? And then it's got a weird photo of somebody dressed as Jesus, I guess. Very, very 70s, full beard, full long hair parted in the middle, that sort of thing. It's also a gay porn.
Ah. That's fitting. As we had mentioned, the episodes we recorded on Scanners, while Sarah was looking up information about Scanners 2, she had discovered that somewhere in Argentina they made an unrelated movie called Scanners 2 Doppelgainers.
What?
Which is just a gay porn.
Oh, I see. But not about gay men who want to get heavy.
No, unless that's also part of it, but...
Well, only one way to find out.
Yeah, well, we're hoping somebody sends it in. Scare at megaphonic.fm.
Of course, the ultimate lost media is KTMA episode 3, Star Force Fugitive Alien 2, which is weird that that's still lost. I mean, I'm assuming Joel has a copy of it.
Yeah, or that Jim Mallon did, because when the MST3K website was regularly posting KTMA stuff just from the host segments, they had stuff from KTMA 3.
And it's not like they don't have the rights for that movie, because they redid it in later years.
That's right. And of course, because that was one of the many Season 3 KTMA remakes. But then again, they never released any of the KTMA Season 3 remakes officially either, so I don't know.
They have the rights to the movie. They presumably have the rights to release KTMA episodes because they've done 2 of them.
Yeah.
Why not this one? Maybe they're waiting.
Maybe this is an ultimate gambit by Joel where it's like, all right, you want a season 13, do you? Well, you're going to have to cough up. I have KTMA 3, but Netflix ain't interested, so you're going to have to cough up all the dollars yourselves. 24 episode order. You know, a director by any other name smells just as sweet.
Yeah, so Jonah and the bots make a joke about how
Al Adamson is the name Alan Smithy uses when he doesn't want his name in a film.
What's funny is that that's actually the plot of a movie.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
there was a movie about Alan Smithy, wasn't there? Like in the 90s or early 2000s, I want to say?
Yeah, it's like 97, 98. It's called an Alan Smithy film, Burn, Hollywood Burn.
That's right. I remember being vaguely curious about it.
Yeah, leave it at curiosity, my friend.
That's what I've done for the last 20-odd years, and I'm a person of inertia.
Despite the promise, Chris, that it was written by the person who gave us Showgirls, crucially, it was not directed by the person who gave us Showgirls. And funnily enough, Arthur Hiller, who directed the film, was so dissatisfied with tampering that he ultimately pulled his name off it. So an Alan Smithy film is an Alan Smithy film.
Oh, fantastic.
Again, he insists to this day that it is not a publicity stunt. He hates the movie.
Well, just in case anybody doesn't know, we should explain who Alan Smithy is or isn't.
Oh, absolutely. So it's the George Spelvin of the cinema world.
Well, that explains everything.
It is, in fact, the chosen pseudonym for a long time if a director wanted to distance themselves from a project. And here's the crucial thing. The common understanding of Alan Smithy is that people do this when their movie is bad. And that's not the case.
I mean, that's got to be mostly the case, but maybe there are other reasons.
Here's the thing. The DGA, the Directors Guild of America, only grants the Alan Smithy credit. And again, this is the past. Alan Smithy is now, generally speaking, no longer used. It's a kind of a touchy subject. We'll get into that. But you have to have meetings with the DGA, make your case as to why you think the movie should have an Alan Smithy credit rather than your personal credit. And there's a series of rules. One is that the movie has to be extremely different, jarringly different from the movie you set out to make and your plans for the movie. Secondly, and this is perhaps the most crucial thing, curiously, is that you cannot have publicly badmouthed the movie at any point. Otherwise, you'll lose any attempt at getting your Alan Smithy credit. And of course, you will no longer work again.
Well, fair enough.
And as such, too, it's like you cannot publicly go out and say, oh, yeah, I took my name off that movie. So a lot of people have been denied Alan Smithy credits because you would think, again, your movie is just bad. You slap Alan Smithy on it. No, it's really down to the fact of, well, is it the movie that you set out to make? Do you feel you deserve a credit on the movie if you're replacing another director, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, okay, so we should probably list some examples of films where Alan Smithy has been credited. And maybe you know of one or two movies where they attempted to get an Alan Smithy but didn't.
Oh, yeah. So, I guess some of my favorite Alan Smithy films, the very first one is actually a decent movie called Death of a Gunfighter. And that happened as a result of the star of the film, Richard Widmark, was unhappy with the original director. So he had the original director replaced. That guy's name was Robert Totten. And he was replaced with Don Siegel. Siegel is a great filmmaker who, of course, directed, you guessed it, Donald Pleasance in a little movie called Telephone with Charles Bronson. But Siegel felt that he could not, in good conscience, take the credit. So that's where Alan Smithy came from in the first place. It's like, well, he didn't want to make the movie. He simply made the movie that Widmark wanted to make and took the job. So that's why we have that original credit. But I think my favorite is the fact that a director named Rick Rosenthal, who's made several horror movie sequels and occasionally makes a movie of his own of his own desire, was tapped to direct The Birds 2.
As in the Hitchcock film.
Yeah, a belated sequel to The Birds.
Oh, no.
So The Birds 2 Land's End is prominently credited to one Alan Smithy.
One of the movies that got an Alan Smithy is Wad, The Life and Times of John C. Holmes.
What?
Yeah, I don't know why it got. Let me see if I can find out. Oh, that's quite a poster.
I can only imagine.
Well, wait. Hold on.
Mystery is afoot. A John C. Holmes mystery.
So I'm not sure exactly what's going on, because sometimes movies have certain versions which are under their name and other versions which are under Alan Smithy. For example, Dune, the 1984 movie directed by David Lynch. In the theatrical release, it was David Lynch. In other releases that were extended or edited for TV, it's Alan Smithy.
Funnily enough, Lynch's screenwriting credit is Judas Booth for Judas Iscariot and John Wilkes Booth.
So why did they stop using the Alan Smithy code?
Well, it's partly tied to the aforementioned an Alan Smithy film, Burn Hollywood Burn. But I think what really blew it up and ruined it, because the idea was this was supposed to be a secret. People were supposed to think that Alan Smithy was a real credit, and only dorks like me who read Leonard Maltin's movie guide at age 8 would know who Alan Smithy is.
Yeah, it was pretty widespread, I think. I mean, I knew about it. I'm not as much of a cinema buff as you are.
Yeah, I guess by the time you get to the 1980s, there's enough kind of jokes about it and kind of pop culture osmosis that people know what it is. Enough people were watching SCTV to get the Alan Smithy jokes. So they're not apes, they're chimps, which is just to emphasize.
Yes, this is Trudy the Chimp. We've talked about apes in movies before when we did Time of the Apes, but even then we started talking about some chimpanzee movies. So, let's try to stick with chimps this time, but, on the other hand, let's just have fun. This is a podcast, not a zoo.
Well, you know what? The first thing comes to mind in terms of movies, in terms of movies about primates gone wild, is, of course, not a chimp movie, but an orangutan movie.
Okay. Which one is that?
That is Link from 1986.
So tell me about Link. I don't know this one, I don't think. I assume it's a Zelda ripoff?
Well, tempting. I would, at the very least, expect somebody during the production of the film to say, "I am error."
Yes.
But it does have the equivalent of that, because the movie, which I assumed would be a taut thriller, opens with the Canon Films logo.
Oh, goody.
So we're in Go-Go Boys territory.
Wait, now it looks like it stars Elizabeth Shue and Terrence Stamp, and they're both good.
Yes, it does. Here's the thing. Link is basically... Chris, I should ask, have you ever seen or heard of a little movie called Shakma?
No. Shakma?
Shakma.
No, absolutely not.
Well, Chris, what you're about to do, what's about to occur, is that you, via Slack, are going to see the trailer for Shakma. It ties into to Old Link. Because, you know what? I feel that you and the listeners deserve this experience.
Okay.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
I should have just watched the last 15 seconds of it, I suppose. But
Probably. But the trailer VO guy just freaking out, listing all the cast credits with the most unimpressive. It's like, also starring such and such from Kate and Allie.
yes, that was the best part.
And then he gets to, and Shakma, starring shocking audiences everywhere.
And Shakma!
Shakma!
So intense.
Featuring Roddy McDowell as Professor Sorensen. And Shakma. Shocking audiences everywhere.
Like, the fact that he screams the title, it's like, I don't think that's ever been done in a trailer before or since.
Okay, so what does this have to do with Link?
Well, it's about an ape on the loose, an ape that has been given augmented intelligence. And, of course, to show this in the film, to show both the baboon, in this case, of Shakma, who's been given augmented intelligence, but also his predatory instincts, to get Shakma to do things like ram into doors. They had pheromones from a female baboon, and they sprayed it. So if you pay close attention, you realize that Shakma has a boner in every scene.
Oh, no.
Because it's incompetently shot.
Oh, no.
Now, Link, on the other hand, was directed by Richard Franklin, who made a very fun little horror movie with Jamie Lee Curtis and Stacy Keach called Road Games, and the surprisingly great and totally worthy sequel, unlike The Birds 2, Psycho 2, to Alfred Hitchcock's original. Again, great Australian film director. So he made Link, which is, again, about intelligence testing and augmentation on an orangutan. It's shot extremely well. It stars Terrence Stamp and Elizabeth Shue. It has a score by Jerry Goldsmith instead of 4 notes on a keyboard. And so it's not a particularly compelling script, but if you want to watch an ape gone amok movie that's genuinely tense and well made, Link's your movie. Plus, because of that aforementioned Jerry Goldsmith score, if you ever wondered, what would a Gremlins 3 soundtrack sound like? Believe me, I owned the soundtrack to Link before I ever saw the movie.
Well, that also reminds me of Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp, which is actually chimps this time. We actually have chimpanzees.
Finally.
Do you know anything about Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp?
No. Does this involve a secret erection much like Shakma?
We'll get to that. However, Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp was a children's show that, unlike this movie, actually was made for children, that ran for one season, basically, 1970 to 71. And it was created by 2 guys, Stan Burns and Mike Marmer, who had been long in the business. They'd written for Ernie Kovacs and a bunch of other things. They wrote for Carol Burnett, and in particular, they wrote the best Carol Burnett sketch, which is the Gone with the Wind sketch.
Oh, yeah.
So good. And they'd also written for a show called Get Smart, which this is kind of based on. I don't know if it's a parody of Get Smart, which is itself a parody of James Bond type films, but it's definitely in that vein. And it's really interesting. It's really both well-made and unwatchable.
So it's impressive that they're wrangling these animals together, but the scripts are terrible, I take it?
Well, let me put it this way. They got hired. They made 17 episodes. Oh, it's kind of complicated, but let's say 17. And they had a 7-figure budget.
Well, okay.
Which is an astonishing budget. It was, at the time, in 1970, certainly the highest budget that had ever gone to a children's show. It might have been the most expensive TV show on at the time. But it's amazing because, unlike in today's movie where you've got this sort of lethargic chimp who barely opens his mouth, like these chimps are very expressive. They're doing all sorts of things. And they had written scripts and they had scenarios of so-and-so is trying to steal the whatever diamond and, we have to intercept them. But all the scenes are sort of very short, and they had the voice actors on set. So the voice actors were trying to improvise along with the mouth motions and the actions that the chimps were doing. So it's this very complicated recording process that they did a fantastic job with in many ways. In other ways, of course, it's a show from the early 70s for children, so it's hella racist.
Oh, no.
I mean, in the sense that, like, every character is, the Russian stereotype or the Arab stereotype or whatever. It's kind of uncomfortable to watch in that sense. And also, it's a chimp show from the 70s. So, yeah, they were probably not treating these chimps the best. They probably didn't have erections on set because right before they started filming, they made the decision to castrate all the male chimps.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be in show business. I don't know if you'd give that up for a popular children's TV show or not, but...
Gotta go with no. That's the opposite of it being hard in show business.
Hey-o! But yeah, exactly. The chimps didn't really have a choice on that. In fact, there's a really interesting documentary that was created to go along with a DVD re-release of these in 99. And it's on YouTube. I don't know whether legally or not, but it's on YouTube. Totally worth watching. Certainly probably better watching than actually watching the show, which you could also find on YouTube, because you get to see some cherry-picked best bits from the show, but also just the weird affect that the creators had. Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, we castrated them. Haha. And they keep talking about how these chimps can do things and how they're basically like, surprise, surprise, sentient creatures who have their own minds and wills. And yet they're like, yeah, and we did all these things to them. It's a very cavalier thing. I don't know. It's kind of cringy and kind of uncomfortable, and I feel bad for the chimps. The product is impressive. What they got out of these chimps is impressive, but surely not worth the terrible things they did to them. So that's about all the time we have. Just time for one more final factoid. It's not even really going to be a factoid this time, I think. Just a little thing that I feel like it would be remiss of us not to mention, which is that early in the film, you have a shot of a character holding a cat, and Crow says,
This guy is the lowest rent Bond villain I've ever seen.
We can't let a passing reference to Ernst Blofeld go by without calling it out on this show, because what is this show if not the world's most stealthy Donald Pleasance fan cast?
Hells yeah.
Did that moment make you happy?
It did indeed. You guessed it. It did.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you love every ape you see from chimpan A to chimpanzee, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/70.
Well, again, thank you again to everybody who writes in or comments on the YouTube channel or however you get feedback to us. It's been really great, and it's super fun hearing from you and getting some unexpected facts that we either overlooked or had no idea existed, such as that great thing about the Star Trek Happy Meal, or the comments we got for our recording right now.
The comments we got for our recording right now. Okay.
I don't know. I sort of spluttered out there. I tried. I tried to tie it all together.
Well, here's another little fun fact. This month marks the centennial of Saul Bass.
Ooh.
And one really weird thing about Saul Bass, who is, of course, most known for being a fantastic mid-20th century poster designer for movies. He did all the ones that have the angles that you remember, the Hitchcock posters and such. He directed one film. And his one film that he directed was called Phase 4. And weirdly, Phase 4, although it's generally considered a perfectly fine movie, ended up on MST3K back in the KTMA era. So we're going to look at that next. Episode 9 of the KTMA season, Phase 4.
Ants. Sing the praises of ants.
Yeah, this is a movie about ants. Not aunts, ants.
Yeah. This is the hit Syd Barrett song "Gigolo Ant," not "Gigolo Aunt."
So yeah, I'm super curious about it. I've been told that I should watch the movie Unmisted before I watch the MST3K version, and I might just do that.
Ooh, and how would you have the opportunity to do that with an obscure little movie like Phase 4?
It's on the Criterion channel right now, which...
What?
Yeah, which is what I think should be the next home for MST3K, and I've tweeted at them to that effect, and listener, I encourage you to tweet at them to that effect, because I think it just makes sense.
Yeah, because it would be so great to see MST3K to tackle a chien andalou.
I mean, I think it would also just be great to see Coleman Francis films Unmisted also appearing on the Criterion channel. That would be terrific.
Hell yes.
But until then...
from chimps to ants, we record the show without pants.
Sexy. Take it away, Theme Squad.